Who's like,
Yes.
prime time.
Agent departments.
All right, I will call it to order at 6:02. Today's going to be very informal. It is a work session to discuss our 3 items on the agenda. So I will start with Dylan.
Sure, and just to really quickly, now that everyone's in the room, check out the invitations for the upcoming train ride in Georgetown to kind of get to experience the restored coach in action. So I'm gonna take that, and guests are included. Like,
I will say for those of you that haven't seen this, some of our newer members have not, they've had this for what, 2 years now?
Longer.
Maybe 3 years. And the folks at Georgetown Railroad did a lot of this work at like, I mean, if they were making federal minimum wage, I would be astounded. And they have done so much handwork on this. It is absolutely. I'm so excited.
and I think if you can't make it, we can still organize the time to just go up and look at it, but this will be actually riding in the coach.
And then dinner on Devil's Gate, which if you haven't done that, it's really cool too.
Okay, yeah, so anyway, this first item, I talked to Carmen. And when we last spoke about how do we kind of enhance our ability to enforce that 2-block buffer and clarify it and make it stronger. One of the ideas that was brought up was like overlay district that some other places like Breckenridge do or Denver does. It's to say like, you're not in the historic district, but you still have to follow these rules. And Carmen has fairly strongly advised against that. I think obviously it's possible, but she said that, and I don't know if anyone has more information, but it essentially would amount to zoning. And so of all the properties that are specifically within that buffer zone overlay. And so she's concerned about that process and getting it actually passed and the political will with that. Though it is actually. So I was trying to, with that beautiful option, there are potentially other ways to maybe improve things. And so that's what I was trying to sort of start to brainstorm in that report. One that Carmen said definitely would work is we could just, instead of focusing on the 2-block buffer specifically, we could, as a city, just strengthen our multifamily architectural guidelines as a whole and then require kind of compliance with stronger historical guidelines citywide for those kind of construction. And we could potentially add to the code single-family architectural guidelines. And that might be it's local building codes is bigger impact, I guess, than just the buffer around the historic district, but it would, per Carmen, our attorney, it would be easier to do because it wouldn't apply to like specifically rezoning individual properties. It's like a new standard for everyone. And the other thing I wanted to kind of talk about is how to make sure we have the expertise needed to assess whether they're properly addressing those standards in the buffer zone and elsewhere, because if I'm in the buffer zone, I don't have to come to this board for a certificate of appropriateness or anything at the moment. And it wanted to see sort of how everyone with all your expertise thought that might be better addressed to still get good feedback and review outcomes.
You have a feel for how that impacts people, or I guess not even so much that, just the number of houses, say in that 2 houses in a given block of 10 that might not be in compliant, or half of them. You have a feel for that at all?
Well, as far as like current houses that
Yeah,
are.
yeah, if you just said, okay, we're gonna move it out 2 blocks, 600 feet. Obviously, some houses probably would fall right into it and be great, and other ones not. So is it like half and half, or is it such a majority that you feel like that?
I looked at some numbers in terms of the properties within this. Within the historic district, there's approximately 50 properties. Within the buffer area, using the 600-foot dimension, that adds another 150 properties. Of those, more than 100 were in the historic survey that was done several years ago. And of those more than 100, there's almost 20 that are identified as high integrity from a historic standpoint, and about 50 of medium integrity. And now, and something to point out is that most of the buildings in the historic district are medium integrity. There are actually very few high integrity buildings in the district. So in other words, there's essentially another 50 to 70 buildings, or about half of those properties, potentially have historic value. Now, one other way of looking at the question you asked, and this is based on my experience when I was here for about a year and a half. It seemed to me like there were maybe an average of 2 building permits a month, maybe total.
If you don't include like one-stop permits, like a furnace replacement or anything, we just come in and pull it, I would say that's probably.
I would usually get about 2 that I would have to, that Wonder would send to me to review.
Yeah, that's probably fairly accurate. Wonder's been a little more conservative in sending me more things, so, I'm reviewing maybe slightly more than that, but I still wouldn't think it's more than 30 permits, 40 permits in the whole year
And
that actually give reviews.
And the vast majority of the buildings are houses that are in that surrounding area. I do have a number down, I have to find it as to how many are non-residential structures, but the vast majority are houses in that. The other aspect in terms of reviewing it, there is a different way of doing we'll have to back up. There's sort of a bigger question, which is exactly what this buffer is about. Because the buffer is not about historic structures, it's about compatibility with the historic district. And so it only affects what's called new development. So basically it doesn't include any of the historic structures unless someone wants to demolish or move one of those structures. And this is a common thing that happens with historic design guidelines. Over time, they merge topics together and they stop being just about historic, and they become more and more about community character or visual character. Now, if you were just to look at the historic aspect, we don't need half the guidelines we have. In other words, it would be a much smaller list if all we were to do were just to focus on what's historic about these buildings. And I had had been asked to give a presentation to the Park Service several years ago, and basically was part of that presentation was showing him here's an alternative way of looking and using the guidelines. And so that might be something we would consider here, which is basically, let me give an example. There are 8 to 10 different architectural styles of houses. Now, what defines those houses in terms of what are the defining characteristics, it's only about 10 or 12 items. Unless you get close to it and then that list expands to 20 or 30. So it would be relatively easy to say, okay, we already know what the historic style is because the surveyor did that for us. And so all we need to do then is say, okay, well, what are the 10 things we're trying to protect on those pieces of property? And so and the way most guidelines work is you have a document that's, in our case, is what, about 40, 50 pages long. In other communities, it's 200 or 300 pages long. But you really can get it down to like a 1 or 2 page list at most and say, this is all you really have to look at. And so if we were to use kind of an approach like that, it makes the review by both the applicant and staff a lot simpler because what they have to look at is so much smaller. And the fact that we have an identified list of properties, like we know how many late Victorian structures are there. We get the list of what are the identifying characteristics, what are the aspects of integrity for late Victorian, and then the historic aspect just focuses on that. And then we have sort of a separate question of, okay, we have all these other guidelines, do those wind up going into zoning, like for example, hot tubs? Hot tubs don't really need to be in the historic section because there were no hot tubs. But it could be an overall design guideline or zoning requirement. So I guess I'm saying there is another way of how we could do the analysis, but it still brings us back to this question of this buffer is not intended to be doing historic structures. It's intended to protect adjacent historic structures.
Right.
And so that brings me to one final point, and that is, there's one other idea to run by the attorney, it's Carmen or someone else. And that is, for example, making one of the criteria for approval of rezoning being its impact on a historic structure. So in other words, if you have zoning on your property, you can go ahead and do with your property what you're allowed to do today. But if you want to rezone a piece of property, then you have to take into consideration, does it have an adverse effect on the historic properties of this town or the particular property, right? In which case you're making a citywide zoning amendment. You're not making an amendment to 150 property owners who do deserve to be individually notified. It's a select group. But if you take it from the standpoint of you do it citywide, the city attorney might view that differently. Now, that idea then could be extended. Do you also apply it to someone wants to do a final development plan, a preliminary development plan, or a subdivision? Do you also put the same criteria there? And I can tell you in a number of communities, one of the biggest problems is over time, when you get to a point of significant growth pressure, people want bigger lots. So they want to re-subdivide property and combine lots together. And that's one of the problems is that historically in the mining towns, houses were 500 to 800 square feet in size. The average new house that's built today is over 2,000 square feet. Now, those houses are being built up on the hillsides, but at some point, people may want to build those in town. So that would be a reason to say maybe you want to look at subdividing as well. I know Georgetown has this issue in terms of, but from their standpoint, it's more a matter of site coverage. People want to put bigger and bigger houses on the lots as opposed to subdividing. I know in Telluride, that was their biggest problem that they never were able to resolve politically, was that it's becoming a town like Aspen to where people are building 4,000 square foot houses where there's a 600 or 800 square foot house there now. And the way they do it is by combining 4 lots together.
And you lose 3
Well-
multiple lots or houses.
That was an awesome answer to a pretty lame question, so thanks.
Did you have something else? Okay.
Yeah, the buffer is important, but not essential, I think, long-term for preservation. I think that appropriate residential designation and district creation is much stronger. Maybe a challenge politically, but in terms of the long-term value for preservation of the community, I think that is really a necessary thing. It seems to me that the buffer issue, I mean, as far as this city is concerned right here, I mean, the whole thing is an historic environment, including those slopes and everything. So 600 feet, in my mind, doesn't do it. What does it is anything that visually impinges on this valley here where Idaho Springs is. And that leads me to think that the most important thing is for planning, but the zoning commission to really be paying attention and having the developers pay attention to what effects major changes will have on the community as a whole.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the zoning is, goes through city council.
Yes.
Yes.
we would-
So
like,
city
Planning
council-
commission would be a recommend.
But
Planning
planning
commission would be
commission recommend.
recommending, but city council would vote on it. And I'm thinking about like the city council makeup right now. I think right now, you would have a pretty empathetic council to like not only the view shed, but just preservation in general. That has not always been the case, nor can we guarantee that will be, because we don't have a separate zoning commission.
Well,
Oh, so-
and
Okay, so it's, all right. So that any of these changes that, yeah, major projects that are gonna require approval, will want to be, I think this town will want, city will want to judge them. Have some review on the impact on the historic character.
Okay, I can,
And Georgetown says one of the points that you made, which is from a historic standpoint, the third element that they include are the hillsides that surround the town.
Yeah.
So they treat it as, it's the entire valley, that's the historic context.
but I can also tell you, just in looking at the developments, the last three developments actually that we have done in this town, Riverside and then the Habitat for Humanity and now 4 Points.
Yeah.
We didn't have, I mean, Habitat for Humanity actually was voted down. And then Carmen came back and said, hey, and I wasn't on council at that point, Carmen's like, you can't. They're zoned appropriately, and we didn't have anything that's like, that sits right behind the Elks Building, which is a nationally designated building. They did that on their own, like in the 80s. It would have been really great for Habitat for Humanity to look like it matches the two little houses on the hill and the houses in front of it and, you know, this mission style, but they didn't, and the city didn't have anything that we can do. I agree with you 1000%. I would like to see the entire city, including the hillsides, local historic zones. I think though, my thoughts on this are just that I think the buffer zone is a way to get us started because I know at city on council, we can't say, this thing looks heinous because we don't have any, well, you can't, I mean,
No, it's true.
But
you can't.
I think that is a question though, is we could just put together, we as a city, you know, council could enact code amendments that say, you're doing any, we could add residential, but we already have multifamily architectural building site design standards, and we could, I think, build those up to be more focused on actual kind of the historic features that we
I would
want
like
to
that though.
focus
I would
on.
also like it to, so that we don't have people that buy 2 lots and build this big square box so they can get as many square feet as they want. I don't know if you guys read later in the report what people really liked about this town, and I was at the last meeting that Dylan did here at City Hall. People don't want that charm to go away, and the biggest complaint that people have about 4 Points is that they feel like it doesn't look like it belongs in the town. I think you're right, Dylan, when they painted it, it'll look better, but right now, it looks like a big ugly toe on an otherwise manicured foot. I mean, it looks terrible.
Yeah,
Well, and
and that's, for me, that's massing as much as anything, and that's their maximizing the square footage.
Yeah. And I feel like that's really what it comes down to is massing and scale for everything throughout the city, but also in the buffer zone. Cause like, I don't care what your building looks like, if it's appropriately sized for sure, you can make it as ugly as you want. But as long as it's not bigger than the building next door, that's fine.
Yeah, especially height. I don't know what the requirements, if there are any height
35
restrictions, but yeah. Something
Well,
hugely tall would look ridiculous.
well, and basically in every zone district that allows housing, it's a 35-foot height limit. And I don't know how many houses in town are even close to that 35 height limit today. And where I used to work, every new house being built was 35 feet.
I think there's a few along the northern edge that if you're on the street, they look that tall, but if you were in their backyard, they look way shorter.
Right. Well, and the only real maximum density, so we do have some maximum density considerations, like in R1, which is our single family district, we do have a section that says no new structure shall have a footprint that is greater than 50% of the average footprint of all primary structures within 150 feet of that property. So I suppose that does mean, you know, if the average is 1,000, you can't go bigger than 1,500, but that's only for R1, which to be fair is about pretty much everything north of Colorado Boulevard town, at least to this building. But otherwise, all we really have is some standards for like open space requirements, like R1, R2, R3 all have minimum 50% shall be open space. They all have a 35-foot height limit, so you
Well, I mean,
can't spread
also,
out, but you can.
we as a board will be seeing that Carlson development. like that.
Well, it's not a historic district,
But it's buffer zone.
yeah, but you don't review buffer zone.
We could make it so that
That's one of the,
I would like,
one of the questions.
I vote for that one.
I like the idea because, if it overpowers, towers over the entire historic district, it's not gonna look good, and so I feel like we should have some say in it too, maybe not apply as strict a rules as would be for the district itself, but that would be hard, like, how would you carry those
I don't,
criteria from site to site?
I like what Mike said, if the four of us have been on, we saw that survey in 2022 when we went through all the houses. If we did a listing of the 10 to 15 items that are the key, architectural design guidelines that we would like to see of because they broke it out into, I think, 5 or 6 different kinds of houses, I can't remember.
It's, well, like I said, within the buffer
Stylistic.
area, there is about, she identified 9 architectural styles
That's
of,
okay.
of houses. And there's about 5 or 6 commercial styles she identified.
But if we have a list that works for those commercial styles, so if you're in the buffer zone, these are the kind of things that you need to preserve.
Yeah, you could take the existing commercial multifamily section of the zoning that deals with the standards. And it could be somewhat reworked into that list of 10 items. In other words, what you're doing though is you're doing it on the generic level as opposed to, and here's the example. For say an Italianate versus a late Victorian house, different kind of porch, different kind of window. But the basic common standard is window shape, without saying what that window shape is. So it would be possible to reshow that section of the zoning so that it more aligns with the historic character, but is not as specific as saying you have to do this as a 4 square. It has to be 4 square architecture.
So would it, just to make sure I'm visualizing it right, we could add to that section, here are the 10 most important architectural.
There's several ways of doing it. One would be, you basically define something for each of those 10 areas and say, this is what the requirement is. For example, there already is a requirement that says, which has to deal with the massing, the maximum ridge line length is X feet, which I think is 75 feet. That's a massing issue. It's being done there. We could look at sort of what are all of the ones that define a historic character and say, okay, what's the generalized version of that? And then for the historic structures, we have the more specific list that applies to the style. That's one way of doing it. Now, one of the most famous early sets of design guidelines was done in New Orleans. And what they did is they came up with a list of, it was like 12 or 14 items, and they said 4 mandatory, but you have to do at least 6. For the time they did it at, I think that was a good idea. I think we've moved beyond to
I was gonna
where,
say, I think we need.
to need more than 4 being mandatory.
So, but what is the ultimate goal of this? Are you looking to prescribe that people build new construction in a certain style?
No, it's not a particular style. It's basically saying, it's basically the point that you made before. You sort of go through the list. Massing is what you start out with. How big is the building? How tall is the building? Those are your 2 starting points in terms of what makes the biggest visual impact on a community. Surprisingly, color comes up pretty high on that list, which almost no one regulates from a historic standpoint.
And you should.
However, no, it's exactly that type of thing. So we're saying that, as in the case of the specific project we just talked about, is that you can't do a long continuous mass. you have to break it up to where you do what are called connectors or inserts, where basically the building for 10 feet shrinks in, so it looks like, as you come down the street, it looks like it's several buildings. And then when you get next to that insert, oh, you say, oh, they're connected together. But that idea is you have this offset where you create the appearance as you approach it, that this is multiple buildings and not one building. And that's the most widely used technique in terms of how do you deal with large additions to existing small historic structures, is you use what are called connectors, links, hyphens.
Yeah. That's usually done very well.
Well, and it's interesting because I feel like we have some of that already, but clearly those buildings were grouped without those being substantially included.
Right, and that happens, and the problem is, part of it is that there's so many things that staff is being asked to look at. There isn't enough time to do it, and part of the reason to bring up the idea of, okay, we could prepare in advance, understand each style. So staff doesn't have to look at 50 pages of design guidelines. They're looking at 1 or 2 pages that applies to that style. Because those are the things the Park Service says, that's what you're supposed to be protecting, are those things.
And for, like, if it wasn't someone from the apartment complex, let's say, in the historic district, would we then say, what style are you using, or would we look at what's surrounding it and apply that style to the review?
Well, that's sort of a bigger question. The language that's in the code now is it basically, it says, it refers to being compatible with the character historically of the city,
Right.
capital C. And that probably needs to be better defined, so someone doesn't say, that means city-owned properties, it doesn't mean the entire city. But no, it doesn't necessarily have to be a particular style. It's more a matter for the new structures to look like they're compatible, as opposed to saying everything has to be Queen Anne style, Victorian.
More era or something rather than.
They're not brutalist, say.
Yeah. So then you do have cases where, though, you have to consider that. It's a digression, so I won't go further with that, but.
When the application comes in, staff reviews it to see if it meets the code, it's gonna be approved for construction, say a new house in the historic district. A new house near the historic
In the
district,
buffer
there's a
zone.
buffer zone. So they're supposed to consider the historic character. In the application material for approval by city staff, they explain how they are meeting the character. Is there an
I believe
expectation that they will explicitly address it? And could that be made just part of it? Not just that you're thinking about it, but this is how I want my building permit, this is how I thought about it, and this is
I like
how I'm
that.
explaining it, so.
Well, we have not really done anything with the buffer zone. I mean, had we done something with the buffer zone, we might have been a little more on the ball with Habitat for Humanity. Cause
Like I said,
that's,
there's only one building that came up in the year and a half I was here,
Right.
and that's 1800 Colorado.
Which is where those, like, it's right up.
It's a
Yeah.
2-story,
Apartment.
But
and
you-
I got them to basically change the wall material they used and to change the
so
railing.
that actually does not fit very well, but it does fit with the building that it's connected to.
Mhm.
So I can see where that would be an argument either way, because that first building was already there. This just looks like it's an extension of it,
But what they wanted to do was something that looked like tile. For
which
the
would have
exterior
looked
wall.
terrible.
So that, the question is, how does this proposal, and maybe there aren't that many, so. But how does this proposal address the character explicitly in terms of style, material, massing, height, fenestration, the whole, the orientation of the street,
Well-
the whole thing.
Mass and height is somewhat addressed
Already.
already, but I like the idea if we did style, and I love the idea that we make it, if you are doing something brand new or a major, I think it's more than 20%
Yeah.
of a renovation in the historic buffer zone. Because honestly, the historic district, there's not a whole lot that people could do down there.
And that 20% is pretty tricky because that can
Tough.
include the interior bathroom wall and the, the back corner and all that, and you can come up with something that is really doesn't fit well with the district, but but it is within that, less than, it's, there's an existing shell of the building and you're just doing a rehabilitation kind of thing. But I would think that the city staff, if it's trying to preserve the historic character and the feeling of the village, would want to know from the developer how this project accomplishes that and show proof essentially that they've thought about it and dealt with it. And even at the beginning of the project, well, how is this going to fit in?
And that's a good question because that honestly, that's not something that we've done.
Well, and I mean, like, I will push people to, I will tell, like, if someone submits a zoning application or a variance or something, I will just as practice say, here's the 6 criteria for approval, like right to each one. So that you
Yeah.
show me that you think that you comply.
Right.
And I've been here for going on 2 years now, and I've not had a single final development plan, which is the one that would really be the process when we'd be looking at this, because no one has proposed a new multifamily, no one has proposed any new development in the buffer zone in almost 2 years. But we know that it's coming quite soon, and I think based on how the code is written for a final development plan, it basically says,
It says very little.
yeah, basically for a final development plan, it says it doesn't meet the standards of the municipal code. And so I think I would have the latitude to say, hey, well, this is a clear standard, it's multifamily. Like, here's the historic guidelines in our historic survey, like, give me, part of your narrative needs to include this.
And so that would involve reworking that section of the zoning code
To,
regarding the building standards.
but I think the building, right, I think and that's sort of what I was thinking as the initial, instead of really addressing the buffer zone as it were, we could address every multifamily development in the city, to Clark's point, how everything has an impact on.
Because the project is on the old football field is not that far off of meeting those standards now, which is why they would need to be reworked.
Right. Yeah, because it doesn't contain anything currently discussing historic character sort of
And
thoughts.
And the language, and this was covered in Dylan's memo, is it splits it into 2 things. It says the should part, which is maybe enforceable according to the attorney, says support architectural features of the district. And that's more limiting in terms of a description than saying what to encourage. Encourages building materials, styles, and designs. And so we come back to where we are basically limited to doing things for new construction or replacement structures that relate to the district, and it doesn't do anything for the existing historic structures that are outside of the district. And that's why I brought up the point of that there may be other changes to the zoning ordinance worth looking at.
Yeah, I think that is the clear, I guess, request for direction is, are we concerned with just the 2-block buffer, or is it worthy of just saying, let's think about the city as a whole and make it so that every development, because the field house departments wouldn't be included in the 2-block buffer, but they do clearly impact overall historic nature of the city.
Since all of you have been to at least one meeting, my goal is full city. I would like to see the entire city. I just had someone contact me and say, hey, I have a friend that lives in the buffer zone, like a block outside of historic, he wants to paint his house, who does he talk to? So you're probably getting a phone call. But that's changing people's thought process, that you actually have to think about, you know, how do we do this? And like, that's where I wanna go with this, that we all think about this as this is a living history town. The historic part of it is an everyday aspect for us. So if we could go whole city, if that is actually a better direction, like I love this idea, you know, HPRC is a formal referral agency for final development plans. I love that. Come talk to us about how does this affect, you know, the whole historic look? How does this affect the views? How does this affect, like, if we're going up, you know, I'm crying over the Pine Slope development, but that was 20 years ago that was first approved. We can't do anything about that. I don't know, what's everybody else's thought process on that?
So I think the simplest route to do that is actually to do it rather through the zoning. Say, rather than try and go for an overlay district or the creation of multiple districts at the same time, because that's a long discussion with a lot of property owners to get there. As opposed to amendments to the zoning ordinance which can be very specific and very limited. And the benefit to the property owner is right now, this buffer requirement. If I'm an owner, what does that mean I have to do? If I'm an owner of a property, I don't know what that means when it says support the architectural features of the district and I have a house and I want to do something to it.
It might have also stopped that whole mess that is the parking lot on the corner of 16th and Colorado. Because again, it was rated commercial. We didn't have anything in place with buffer. You know, we couldn't say, no, you actually have to make this look more late Victorian. They didn't. They did Breckenridge Mountain architecture. That didn't work. And now it's an ugly parking lot.
For the hotel.
Yes, because we didn't have, so my concern just in being with the city is twofold. One, we do have projects that are in the buffer zone that are coming that I would like to see reflect a transition, or at least, you know, some respect for the way that the downtown district looks. But also I also really strongly believe we should work with the whole town. So to me, it's twofold. Like, do we need to address the buffer zone first and then bring it further out? I don't know. That's a process decision, I think.
I think the easier path is the building design section of the zoning ordinance. Because it involves the fewest and simplest changes involved. The buffer zone, what can be done easily is just to define what does that one sentence mean, and that's to the benefit of the applicant. So when it says support the architectural features of the district, and they come in and ask, there's an answer to give them. Because the idea is to try and make it easy for them to comply.
Yes.
And the starting point is for them to know what it is they have to comply with.
Yeah, I will say, usually people come in with a preliminary idea before they have fleshed out plans. So if I did have a sentence or two that says, support the architectural standards of the district by doing this, 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 or even just giving recommendations, then they can, from the start, design it with those in mind. I'm sure even with the 1800 Colorado, they probably had already drawn up plans by the,
Yes, they had.
and so you're like, well, they're obviously gonna push back if you ask for different roof lines and things like that, because that's a much bigger process than changing a few materials.
And what specifically occurred is they came in and I said, okay, I will give you a sheet of information by tomorrow noon.
Right.
And so I put together a 1-page sheet that basically explained about materials and sort of where to find examples of those materials already in the city.
Yeah.
But that was the idea of having something to be able to readily give someone to explain, oh, this is what it looks like, but what you're asking me to comply with.
Well, that kind of goes back to something we've talked about before, and that's kind of creating just guides and checklists broadly that says like, oh, you want to comply with what else is around the city, here's the materials that are appropriate around the city. And that's something I guess that would be accessory to any changes that are made. It's just, this is what we like and this is what we don't like. Just give to people, because then they're like, oh, well, now I know what there's
I like that, and my question, I guess, would be, and I don't know if this is process or what, would it be easier to go like with just changing the design code? Or to address buffer and design code, like what's gonna be easiest when we look at the process of changing this via the city?
Well, and when you think of the buffer zone, what would be your ideal?
Okay, I know it's a little more work, I love the idea of if this is what your structure looks like, if it's this or that, whatever the design is, here are the things we'd like you to preserve. Here's your checklist. Are you preserving these things? Are you doing more than 20%, you know, structural change? And have you come in and met with, and I really like the idea that they have to come in and meet with HPRC. I realize that adds to like every month that we may have something, but I find that when we meet with applicants, while they're not thrilled all the time, they do tend to have a better understanding of what we're asking for, and I feel like it makes it go a little bit easier.
Saves some money too,
But,
Pardon?
but,
it saves some money.
but right now, that's not covered at all. In terms of historic structures, this only covers new development in the buffer based on the existing language in the zoning. So it's not a matter of saying we'd like you to preserve this unless we put something in the code that says this is something you were required to do or more than just strongly encouraged to do. That's kind of the point of saying, okay, where do we go? The city attorney is basically saying that if you're going to try and extend this to all the properties, including the existing ones that have historic value, that basically gets you involved with
Rezoning.
all those property owners, all those 150 property owners in the surrounding area.
And at least half of them are not gonna be thrilled.
And that's one of the reasons by saying if you take it citywide, it somewhat diffuses the issue because it's basically everybody's under the same requirement.
Yeah, I like that. You're just gonna pick on individual owners, cause they're gonna think they're getting picked on,
They are gonna think
whether
that.
they are or not. They're gonna think they are, and when they get into that mentality, it becomes a shit show. But if you make everybody be responsible for the same sort of thing, you're not picking on everybody, you're making it an overall fact that everybody has to comply with. Not the whole amount of stuff that they think they're gonna do, but you have specifics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you have to do 6 of them. Guess you need more than 5 to do 6, but you get the idea.
Yeah, and I think it's as much guidance as to how to, for property owners, as to how they could think about this question of how things are appropriate in the district. The more information, the better. So. You know, what are the guidance materials that are available? What's the short description of the character that people like here so much? What's the short description of the history? What's the short description of the architectural styles? What kind of building do I have then, and how does that relate to it? And then what am I doing, and how am I gonna respond to that? So if there is some easily accessible way for property owners to think about that, I think that's a real plus. I still think, as a separate and more complicated matter, the idea of designating residential districts, I just took a ride Colorado again and Virginia, and all that, looking at other states where I've worked, that'd be a residential historic district, for sure, no question about it. And the only question is how you draw the boundaries. And how you do the politics and build support for it in the community to make it self-preserving going forward. But anyway, so I think there are two separate areas of activity and need here. One is a more general, and I agree with you that I think it's, as I said earlier, I think it's kind of the whole city and all of its wonderful surroundings, how it's cradled here in this valley. And then And then further, more robust, serious community buy-in for preserving the specific residential buildings that are components of these tremendous residential districts. That this is-
And it may be the simplest way to do that again on a citywide basis, what Dylan mentioned, is to develop some standards that apply to single-family homes.
Because we have a fairly decent standards with commercial.
Yeah, I feel like the multifamily commercial ones, if we added a section about this is what we're actually looking for, 10 most important things, meaning that, like, just a few historic oriented things to build upon this and make it a little better makes it stronger. But we don't have anything for single family right now.
I did do single family.
And then there's the other route is, do you write it in as a criteria? If you come in for something other than a building permit, if you want a zoning change or a replanting of property, does that include a criteria in terms of how does that affect the historic integrity of the neighborhood? However, there's different ways of defining it. And right now, what's listed is like, there's just like 2 criteria that you have to meet. And that's actually a good thing. I mean, actually, it's one of the things that I think is very good about Idaho Springs' zoning ordinance. It's very straightforward and it doesn't get complicated. Putting something in there about historic is making it a little more complicated. But this gets back to the point that you mentioned, and it's sort of the bigger issue is, where does the city want to go in terms of historic preservation? Sort of we're at the point of the comprehensive plan, and this is the point of saying, okay, if there needs to be a change in direction or expansion or whatever, this is the point to get that into the plan.
I think it is, and I think I don't know who saw the block party on Wednesday, where the comprehensive plan was on display with the architects.
The downtown improvements.
Yeah, the downtown improvements and like the garage. And I had a long conversation with one of the architects. I'm like, this basically needs to look like an extension of the Roberts garage. He's like, well, we tried to do that. I'm like, you really need to do that because this is in the historic buffer zone. 240 is our gateway. This is what people see when they come in. You know, I can tell you, I need to see this look even more historic. Like, you really need to step it up on this one. You've done a decent job. I need to see more because part of what makes this town, like this town's draw, is its historic aspect. This only halfway gets there. He was like, okay. And he didn't hear that. I was over bothering the young guy.
Okay, but there is another way of doing that, but that's again a digression. And that's the old actual indoor parking garage that used to be 1 block further west, which was done in early 20th century style architecture. But it was an actual indoor, there's a picture of it in the downtown plan. But there actually was across the street from the school, a large indoor parking garage. And it was in the early 20th century architectural
The
style.
old school? Or Carlson?
Carlson.
Okay.
And there's a picture of it in the downtown plan of what that garage used to look like. And it's on the Sanborn map. It's on the 1907 Sanborn map. And so the point I'm making, and this goes back to the notion of the height thing, is that it is, in the period of significance, it's a different building. And so I think it's okay if it actually looks like it's a different building, but it's still appropriate to the time. In other words, there didn't have to be an extension of the existing building on the corner all the way across, although that's a fine approach. But another approach is do something that is still within the period, but it can look like it's a Dunkin'
So they
Donuts.
had another design, and I just think when they looked like they were extending the garage, it looked better. Visually, it was more appealing for what else you saw downtown when you're looking at the backs of the buildings from like the Idaho Mall side.
And that's gonna be a high pedestrian traffic route of people coming out of the garage.
This is the garage from the downtown plan up on the screen for.
Yeah, that's the picture in the middle. That was a parking garage.
So yeah, it doesn't quite look like that. I think we'd see in the test.
No,
There it is. That would have been simple.
It's kind of cool.
Then it had the levels and.
And even it reminds me of the Elks, like, because the Elks is kind of a weirdo, sitting in our, like architecturally, it's that mission style. And that has more of that look to it.
So.
Yeah, go ahead, you had a thing you wanted to.
Oh, I was gonna ask about what folks thought about adding single family guidelines, because that feels more controversial maybe for people who live in town than the multifamily does, since we already have multifamily and commercial standards. We don't really have single family standards.
That's gonna upset people. I think we're better off pursuing actual historic districts and not touching that, whereas I think we could get a lot of support.
Right.
Just forget about the buffer zone and do it citywide for commercial and
What about the other,
multifamily.
what about the
People
other
are
much
upset.
longer term approach? In other words, we're talking about a 40 or 50-year process, but saying all of these are processes that require a hearing and decision by city council. Historic preservation has to be taken into account on those projects. So you may have a single family home and you want to tear it down and put, well, that's different. Well, no, it isn't, because basically the idea is if you're going to change the use of a property or combine two lots together, saying, okay, that triggers a requirement. We're not saying you have a house and you can use that house as it is, you've got zoning. But if you want to do something different, like combine lots together, now you have to take into account historic preservation.
Right, I think the only thing you missed, I don't know, maybe you missed this, is if you're like, I'm just gonna knock down this existing home that maybe only has medium integrity or low integrity, but fits the district, and then on my small lot, just build something that's totally out of character, even if it's not 4,000 square feet.
And part of that would be approaching regulations regarding demolition of property, whether it's historic or not. For example, what some communities do, and I can't remember if Denver does this, I know Telluride does it, is that if you're going to demolish a structure, you have to first do a notice that tells people, if you want to haul this building away, you've got there's this 4-week notice in the newspaper that says there's this 4-week opportunity. If no one is interested in doing that, then you announce that the building is available for people to come in and salvage what they want out of the building before the building can be demolished. So essentially, it's not preventing them from demolishing a building, it just says you have to do 2 things before you can demolish. Give someone an opportunity to move the house. Number 2, salvage what's in the house if no one wants to move it.
And some places do have an ordinance where they're not gonna tell you what you can or cannot do with your house, but you can't demolish it, which leads to some weird situations where they're like, well, I effectively demolished it.
But if you
But I
make
can't-
it or something.
Yeah,
And then that gets into a maintenance issue, and from a preservation standpoint, it's demolition by neglect. But it's really
but if you have
also,
code enforcement,
right, but yeah, the flip side of that is saying you can't allow a property to deteriorate. There are minimum maintenance requirements.
So on the existing strategies, under the existing objective in the comprehensive plan, number C talks about work with the state or other entities toward available grants to complete a citywide survey. That's not, here's how I would strengthen that. I think that idea is right, but I would say complete a citywide survey with a view to identifying districts and landmarks for designation and long-term community preservation, something like that. And then semicolon and seek state or other potential entities for potential grants.
Well, the citywide survey is what was done in 22. And it basically said, here are the 3 or 4 best candidates to now investigate in more detail.
All right, well, then it would take that to the next step then.
We did kind of move into like the historic resources.
Oh, rather
comprehensive
than
plan,
that.
or are we talking about
Yeah, we're in.
the buffer?
We're so, back to buffers.
And I do
Sorry.
think law,
Yeah.
as we move into that though, it is also thought, I think it's important to think like these things that probably would be difficult to do in the next 6 months, let's say, maybe we consider putting those into the comprehensive plan because we could do it over the next 5 years. Something like the overlay zones, like investigating overlay zones or something.
So
Anyway.
would the comprehensive plan make reference to the buffer to strengthen it? Should it?
We briefly discussed that before. There's a map that shows the historic district. And it would make sense to actually show the buffer on that same map. Because it's something that actually exists in the code, so it would make sense to show it.
What can we reasonably accomplish for the buffer zone in the next 6 months? That's really, because if we can't do it, then, not that it's not worth doing, but we don't need to wear hair out right now trying to figure it out.
Well, what about the Carlson building? Has that been sold? Like, what's sort of the?
It's tentatively for sale, the closing date is next year.
Okay,
We've already had, it's under contract, yeah, we've already had a meeting with the developer. He says that they will do what they need to do.
I talked to them recently, they're applying for, this isn't directly related to historic preservation, but basically they're applying for funding for low-income housing tax credits to be able to actually fund constructing multifamily units there. And since he's like, hey, we've, got it in and we're working on, getting ready for round 2 or whatever, I've sent him all of the buffer zone language and the historic design guidelines and the part, all the requirements to say like, be thinking of this now because it is very important. So I'm
Plus they're right
hoping
next
that
to
they're
the
thinking
Carnegie,
about it.
that's, and the hose house.
Well,
Someone
it's,
gets some historic preservation tax credits, historic housing tax credits, and then he doesn't have to build a new building.
yeah,
Oh, but the
they,
plumbing in that building is like,
They can redo plumbing, that's fine.
well, and another, on that subject, obviously now we have quite stringent parking standards, so a lot of the community doesn't think they're strong enough, but we
Sorry.
that
are,
was a totally statement of the understatement of the century right there.
we are going to obviously, if they're redeveloping this site, they will have to provide a parking lot, which
And open space.
I think there's a discussion of if they're just creating 70 parking spaces on a property, what does that do to the historic character of the area? And so that makes it even harder to redevelop that site unless you put it underground or inside.
It's like a natural limit on size.
And there's only like a 10-foot, like, we're so close with the creek. Most places, even like on Minor Street, they went down maybe 10 feet. And they were running into water. I know the people that were doing some of the geophysics in the Opera House and they didn't even make it to 10 feet before they hit water.
It's like 8 feet.
Huh?
Yeah, it's like 8 feet. I
Yeah.
think.
Blasters.
Another question out of my own ignorance. Incentives. A house in the buffer zone, are there incentives for them to comply to whatever they just?
At this point, no, but if we had even a local designation, that would allow them to get historic preservation tax credits, like, I've been bleeding for like the last 3 or 4 years about, hey, if we help you designate your house, you are then eligible to apply for tax credits, and I think they said at CPI, like still 75% of available historic preservation tax credits are still, like, those are still available.
That's for the commercial ones.
Mm.
There's no limit on the residential.
There's no limit, okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
City, state, federal, all the
State.
way up, state,
There are federal ones for commercial, but not for,
okay, residential sticks with the state.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
for
you.
owner occupied.
I'm learning.
Single family, yeah, there are for resident, for multifamily.
There are other types of incentives that can be done through zoning. Many historic houses are non-conforming in one way or another. Setbacks, lot lines,
The entire
site
site.
coverage, whatever. And so what you can do is put incentives into the zoning ordinance that says is if you basically are restoring or renovating the building rather than tearing it down, these are modifications that are allowed to you in terms of things like setbacks or lot coverage or whatever. So in other words, what you're doing is trying to come up with reasons of not tearing it down. By saying, we'll give you more flexibility on this property if you keep the house there.
But what would, I'm trying to imagine the instance where that would protect the property and provide them something that would be an incentive. Can you give an
Well,
example?
for example, let's say the setback, the side setback is 5 feet. But the house is only 2 feet from the property line.
But it's already only 2 feet.
The existing house is 2 feet. So you would allow it in addition to the house to be only 2 feet from the property line. Now, there's a separate building code issue, but that's an example of the kind of thing that you can do through zoning. The more common one, and we don't need to do it here except in the East End, which is not a historic issue anyway, and that is usually its height. Is that often in larger historic towns than Idaho Springs, you often do have historic houses that are over the allowable height limit. And you basically let them keep that non-conforming height. And that's actually worthwhile.
But only if they were going to build an addition, which would then degrade the historic integrity of the building that we're trying to.
Well, that's where you'd be saying is that if you don't tear down the historic house in order to build the bigger house you want, we're gonna let you continue to have the greater height limit that exceeds the zoning.
I would be hard pressed to say me on the height limit.
I don't think there's any examples.
There is one, we were just looking at it over on Colorado,
It's what,
it's like
12,
13,
20?
it's in between 13 and, is it 13, 12 and 13?
It's on the 1200 block,
Yeah, and it's that white, the skinny white house.
1229.
Yeah, that sucker might be pushing the 35 limit. But I don't know how old that one is.
1996.
Oh, so they actually, there we go, there's
This
one.
is it's gonna show you that, yeah, you can try to be like, oh, it's Victorian style, but if you're not paying attention to mass and scale, it's
And
bad.
this is bigger than the one, this one is an original.
Mhm. This is historic.
Oh,
It's
I think this one's
oh,
also historic, but this
Yeah,
one,
this guy.
oh yeah, you got it.
96.
96 according to this assessment.
Do you measure height though to the average height of the roof? So it's probably okay on 30 feet.
Yeah, it's not absolute height at the top of the,
That one's so bad because its neighbor is so short.
and it's so skinny.
It's so skinny,
It's so skinny.
which is kind of the issue with the
I think
habitat
they
houses
just popped
too.
it.
You think they just popped the top on it? You've been here long enough. Did they
Yeah,
just put
I
a?
think they just
a roof-
popped the top on there. I think it was a little building,
Ah,
and because they had no more land, they went up as high as they
that
could go.
looks like.
Oh.
Makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that is teeny. Look at that.
Mhm. But they don't have any more land, so they couldn't go sideways, backwards, forwards, they had to go up.
But what's the address of that?
1229.
So
But I could be wrong.
if there are,
Oh, we should be able to.
we talked about several things though that could happen in the buffer. One is guidance for single family. Expectations for single, not requirements, but expectations for single family development. A whole series of characteristics that property owners should think about as they're preparing their proposal that will allow them to be thinking of, that will call their attention to the historic character of the district. And that their building project in the buffer will support that rather than detract from it. Got that going. Little more detail about what kinds of things to be thinking about that would be considered positive in the buffer rather than negative. Those are all, it seems to me, those are achievable kinds of things.
In the next 6
fairly
months.
Yes.
Short term.
I-
The other thing that is, as I've been looking at the buffer and thinking about it, and it's the cloud. Well, the cloud or even this, that's, where you just sort of run a ruler sort of straight out at a right angle around the edges. The question is a property in or is it out? And I would think that the city would want to not have that be a question for a property owner, and that would involve is a drawing, I think, of a hard boundary that includes the properties that meet this kind of thing or this kind of thing, but so property owner will know if he or she is in or out.
I will also say though that real estate agents are not great because we know people in the historic zone, in a historically designated building that bought that building, had no clue that they were in a federally, their real estate agents didn't say a peep. You know, and when they found out, they were like, what?
But at least then they couldn't argue it. So I mean, I think.
Right.
That's
Should be suing themselves.
the thing that it says, since it says 2 blocks, at the last time we talked about this, we had kind of said, well, 2 blocks is, each block is somewhere between like 250 and 300 feet. So, you know, I drew that cloud based on a 600-foot buffer from the outside edge of the district. And so that's how it got that. But I don't know if it's better to just, Carmen, who our attorney, has said that we could change it instead of saying 2 blocks, we could just pick a distance and say it's 600 feet. And then I could very easily take a 600-foot straight line from each place and identify every single property that's in that.
I thought that we had talked about, like, you guess, just based on the general Idaho Springs block, it was a 300 by 300 on average.
Right.
I mean, this is not exact,
Right,
but on that, so that seems like a fair,
right, okay, so taking that as a definition, applying it on the ground truthing it on the map and
Yes.
identifying
And
the extent of the buffer.
I can do that fairly easily to say, here's 600, and then just like identify every single property. And I could even put that into a spreadsheet for you. But I at least could, you know, show this is every single property that touches 600 foot or less distance from this edge that is clearly defined.
and that should not trigger any kind of zone conversation because the buffer zone is already in our design guide. It's like, we're not changing, we are
Well,
just
and it's in
merely,
the code.
It's in the zoning
code.
ordinance.
but we're clarifying.
Right.
That's it, there's no change, it's just a clarification.
But
And
I mean, do you know, is there any way that we, like, I suppose we can just take an average measurement or something of each of the blocks and say like, you know, this is truly the average because 300 foot for a block is not codified anymore.
Couldn't we just, or why wouldn't we use the platted blocks?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, my concern with the platted blocks is like, it gets real funky the second you don't go. Because you say what's actually 2 blocks from this building? Because there's half blocks and.
that's right, because the hose house is in between 13th and 14th. Like the hose house is where that historic district ends on the west. And that is halfway in between, actually it's less than half because there's Carlson at 13th and then at 14th is the library. So where the hose house is, which is not quite half, is where that
Right,
stops.
well, and I think it's even harder for me anyway, on the east end of the district, like if you look at the map, the
Yes.
east end of the district is basically Clear Creek. And I say, okay, what's 2 blocks from Clear Creek? And so you say, is it like this line here, cause there's 1 block, 2 block? Or is it, you know, and if you go out this way, you know, what's 2 blocks in this direction, because it's not standard like grid.
But are the property descriptions, do they reference a block in those areas?
That's,
Some of the property descriptions go to the Middle Creek.
that is true.
Can you put that map back up?
Oh, sure, yeah, this.
Is there a plat map available for Idaho Springs online, like a historic one?
yeah, it's called Clear Map. If you go to,
Oh, just the Clear
go
Creek
to, go to,
County
go to
GIS.
Clear Creek County GIS and
I
then
got you.
select what's called the new Clear Map.
But I do have the original plat downstairs, and it's on the website maybe, but
So,
you're right, there probably is lots.
That's what I do, because that seems more legally defensible if it's part of their legal description, block 15, lot, whatever.
True.
isn't there within the historic district kind of a rough street grid though?
Right,
Yeah, the blocks are, the streets, I think, are either 50 or 40 foot right of ways. the streets that go north-south, I think it's 40-foot. And then the blocks are 320 feet, I think, in terms of the number of lots. It adds up to, no, it wouldn't be 300, it'd be 300, I think.
So. I mean, so long as there's a rational basis for what the boundary is. Right, I mean, it's. You want one that, it doesn't, not every property or every block is gonna fit that definition, but if you can find a basis to determine. This is a block size, block width,
I think you could say is that, the way I kind of looked at it was. It'll be different in the 4 different directions. That if you go east, if you're going west. There's a certain size block, if you're going north, there's a certain size
Yeah.
block. And you always try to stick with the intent of what does the language say? And that is use what are the physical ones, but in the end, it needs to be a hard line. At some point, so you look
Oh,
at what's.
there's plaster claims on this side, that's gonna mess it
Yeah.
up.
So when you go east is the more difficult one,
Yeah,
but even then.
East is funky, because if you look at the east, using the red line one that Dylan gave us, he's got it just inside of 20th. And that's sort of a shame, because some of those really nice houses are in between 20th and 23rd.
If you're going.
we're gonna get those in an historic district,
If
Okay, I need to back off and remember that.
right?
Yeah,
If you're going east, approximately where 19th is, and that would make sense, would be.
so that'll go right down between,
19th, where if you were to extend an imaginary line from 19th down to Soda Creek. That would probably be a good place to say, that's
Yeah.
approximately 2 blocks.
19th could do it. You look at that whole line.
And then if you're going,
Quite a bit shorter than it would be west, I suppose.
and then if you're going west, except for the bump caused by the library,
Right,
that's pretty easy because you're basically saying in that case,
yeah, you're saying.
it's 12, except to allow for the bump out caused by the library.
Right, and then you say, so are there like 4 or 5, a few houses in that bump out that are in it that their neighbors in either direction are
Yeah.
not?
Actually, the more odder one is gonna be to the north. Because the existing homes, before the land gets just too steep to build on. The existing homes are reasonably within 2 blocks, however. Most of those properties extend way far to the north. Because most of those houses own. The
Up
hillside
the
behind
hillside.
it.
Yeah, that was in the last 20 years though, that BLM gave that to them.
So the houses themselves fall within the 2 block. See, if you're talking about, say, on Wall Street,
West Side Wall,
the north side of Wall. Those houses are within 600 feet, fall within 600 feet of the historic district.
On which.
Or they fall within 2 blocks of the historic district. Because you've got,
I disagree.
see, I think if you did that, if you went from Center Alley of Colorado and then Virginia, so everything south of Virginia falls within that. North of Virginia and West Side Wall Street would not fall into that.
the center alley is not a street, it's an alley.
But our historic district ends at Center Alley, except for like the Trapton Building and the Club Hotel.
But it is like if you take the 600 feet, which is how I drew that line.
So that was
you see the
600
bubble, 600 feet, that bubble is 600 feet, and that red line based on that bubble essentially.
But if you look at like the 1400 block, okay, so edge of the district on the north side of Center Alley. The block above that is block 17. The one above that on the other side of Colorado Boulevard is 18. And that's it.
Right,
So
so
it
then the
just
Wall,
stopped.
then the Virginia Street and Wall Street houses would not be included,
Right.
which is.
North side Virginia, yeah.
Which and I
Only
don't
the
see any argument
houses
about it.
that are south of Virginia Street would be included in that.
Yeah,
Which is fine, because it's true that is 2
that's
legal blocks.
too legal. Honestly, that's how I would do things. Because I do think if you can't, I think you brought this up, if you can't definitively say, look, we went from Center Alley and we did 2 blocks, Colorado, Virginia. If you're south of Virginia, you're in our buffer. If you're north of Virginia or in Wall, you're not in the buffer.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think of doing it like that, but it does make sense if you literally, because it is called 2 blocks.
It's much more defensible.
That's why I was just like, what's the block number? Okay, we're done.
And then again, you have a bump out for the hotel, just like there's a bump out for the library.
So do we bump it out just on Virginia? That doesn't.
No, I think you bump out where you follow you align with the hotel.
I think so.
But yeah, I think the bigger point is what would the average citizen in town think is reasonable interpretation of 2 blocks?
So if we bump out from the district 2 blocks, that would well, it's not gonna save us arguing, but it would be more defensible.
Or you could even just say it's Virginia and don't worry about the hotel causing the bump out, just because you're trying to come up with a simple boundary.
Yeah, and because what else is across from the hotel, right? So
Yes.
Yeah, and
it's not like it's.
they're actually looking to build up their own historic preservation fund, so they can start applying for grants.
So I think a work item then is to solidify this
Historic district
buffer,
for the buffer zone, yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah, yes, thank you.
map it. And say, and I don't know whether it needs to be blessed by city council to clarify that these are what we can, after we've reviewed it and approved it, consider to be the boundaries of the buffer zone and given the, the intention in the historic preservation ordinance and.
It needs to be done somewhere formally so that people, they need to know there was a place I could have found this. I could have looked this up and known the answer to this question.
I think once we decide it, we can go for clarification to city council. Again, we're not changing anything in our design guidelines, we're
Right.
just clarifying, here are the, and then if you have a list of the structures, and we have a list of, here are the characteristics for
That's-
single family homes, that takes care of our buffer zone, particularly within the next 6 months.
Yeah.
I've made a spreadsheet of all the properties.
Didn't we get one though? Didn't we get one in the historic?
No,
survey?
just the buffer zone.
Oh, the buffer zone, okay.
There's a much larger spreadsheet in this survey. But I've made one just of looking at Dylan's buffer. What are all the properties that are within that bubble? So I can send Dylan
Does that seem like a good way forward? What do you guys think?
that.
I like the idea though, with the idea that we're moving towards how do we get the whole city in a historic district. But that's always been one of my goals, so.
Could that be a goal in the comprehensive plan? That's not. A goal would be to identify a process by which development, desired development activity within city of Idaho Springs takes into account the historic character of the city, of the historic district and and surrounding neighborhoods or something like that. Could that be a goal that would point to the city's intention, A, and then B, also justify further actions to formalize that in future years? I don't know.
So would part of that be establishing those 10 to 15 priority items and, making sure people aren't combining lots together and not too tall and stuff like
Well,
that?
like mass and height. That mass and height isn't, we've addressed that, but I think I just know that we have not, when things have come to city council, and actually when things have come to planning, we're not necessarily looking at, we haven't had any demolitions either. I don't think in the 5 years I've been here.
Didn't really have many redevelopments of properties. To date.
1800 was, Colorado was the only, I think about the only one.
Right, and then Wood River Bend was a mobile home park, but that was for,
15, it was 15, I think that was 15, we're about halfway through the
It'll be the new police
Restrictions.
station, but not much is happening to the exterior. And then that introduces a whole different style of architecture
Right,
in
well,
the district.
and they are in the historic district, so they had to go COA process.
But they're not changing, they're not, I think that building was pre-86, 87 when we established the historic district. I think its current iteration was like early 80s. The bank now becoming the police station. Like, I don't think that they're like doing a few bump outs, but they're not changing the overall structure.
Right.
Um,
That's true, yes. Like, yeah, like roof lines aren't changing.
1744
Yes,
was built in 1982.
yeah, and we didn't even apply for federal historic district until 84, and it didn't happen until 86, 87. So I feel like we can't necessarily slam them when they were already there before our historic district and our buffer zone. Because when did the design guidelines first start? I think they were 88, 89. It was right after the historic district was created,
yes.
the very first iteration of them.
And they were somewhat going for, or maybe it was part of remodel, sort of this mountain mining style in terms of something that kind of looked like a head frame
Mhm.
on the outside of the building, which a lot of mountain towns have a lot of that stuff now. It's been built.
Well, I like this direction. What do you guys think that we do the two blocks, like the two city blocks, so that it makes it much more defensible for anyone who wishes to contest it? A list of the houses and like of the styles, so that we can give people one sheet. There's one piece of paper that shows you things that you're gonna have to take into account.
And at this point, we're encouraging them because we can't require it.
No, we can't require it. And then how do we fit in there that they, without changing code or code requirements, that they should come and talk to us? Or at least talk to you, and if you feel it necessary, bring it to,
Right, well, I already think I could refer an application to anyone. Like, I could say, hey, I'm gonna refer to every application that's in the buffer zone to you as chair, or both of you as chair and vice chair. I think, yeah,
But for most building permits, though, you're gonna be limited to a 2-week period.
right.
In other
for
words, you
all
have
those
to turn that around
Yeah,
in 1
so
week or in 2 weeks.
it's 2
2
weeks, and
weeks.
so that's why it's like I couldn't come with the whole application to a meeting necessarily unless we scheduled a work session within that, which we could do. But I figured what I do now, if some sort of rezoning or variance or a final development plan is, we get it in, the first step is a 2-week referral, and I'll send it to CDOT, and I'll send it to the engineers, and I'll send it to, all the relevant parties, Safe Build, the building department, and get all their comments, so someone could be sort of our identified historic preservation referral from this board. And I could ensure that that's done. I could send that for every application. We don't define who is a referral agency. But I think if we were going to say, anyone who wants to come in and they're within the buffer or anywhere, multifamily, whatever, where we have design guidelines, you have to come as a pre-application or something to HPRC, that would have to be a code, of course. But potentially could be done.
I don't think that it would be. I think that it would be received okay on council. I don't think they'd be violently against it. Perhaps mildly.
Yeah, I mean, that is the question I have throughout all of this as well. It's like, I think these are really important, and it's clear from conversations I've had with people over the last 4 or 5 months about the comprehensive plan. They're like, this is our top priority, is protecting character and charm and what's here already. And so I think it's fair to say I've received kind of a positive feedback to say, let's take this to council and make these changes, but the question would be, of course, it's not working. So,
I feel like it is because I think we are seeing, I think we're, this is just my opinion, I think we're at a place where we are seeing some pretty big development projects and 4 Points just got a big pile of money. If this new development project can get a big pile, like, people see this as a way that they can, you know, work with various kinds of housing and get grants. Is it worth pursuing here? Because we're still in the, what is it called, the rural economic zone? Is that was designated during the first Trump administration? Is it rural economic zones?
well, there were opportunity zones.
That's what it is, the rural
but
opportunity
those
zone.
did expire.
Or did they expire?
Yeah, so like 4 Points got in, but now I don't think anyone.
Okay.
There's a bonus for the census tract that Georgetown is in, but not the census tract that Idaho Springs is in terms of getting low income housing tax credits. I've sent that information to Andy. Wait a minute, those LITCH projects, they typically run these 5 years and start from when they get started to actually breaking ground. They're very long-term projects because the financing takes so much time to work out.
This guy seems to feel like he's got a good track. Does that give you enough direction for buffer zone?
Yes.
What about the idea of the other types of approvals, rezonings, subdivisions? To put something in add a criteria in terms of the criteria that have to be met in order to approve a re-subdivision, there would be a criteria added regarding historic preservation.
I like that. I don't know how easily we're going to get that.
And that is a question for Carmen, but I'm guessing that gets around the issue of an overlay zone of a specific set of properties, because that's every property owner.
And it doesn't take anyone's rights away because it's like, hey, as long as you keep your existing, whatever's on site, you have a house, you know, yeah, it's like, I think where that's positive is we have quite a lot, especially east of the bridge, of single family homes that probably have at least medium integrity, chart, that are zoned commercial. And so people could redevelop those. And so
16th to 17th. Perfect.
right, so that I think is potentially an opportunity to address that by saying, if you're not doing anything, you're good, but this, once you change your use through one of these processes, now you have to, you do get to consider.
I think we need to be quick about it because everything going on at Argo is gonna happen. I think the development pressure is gonna be a lot more very quickly once people realize.
Yeah. Right, I mean, I think that's what I tell people about the East End is like, I think things will change in the next, say, 5 years down there. There will be a lot more interest, even though right now they don't think there is. But if the project's successful, then that's going to be a huge draw. And I am starting to see that kind of speculation.
And someday they'll be done with Floyd Hill.
You're funny.
5 years.
But does that give you enough direction with this? Because I feel like we could continue on, like this spirals out and out and out. But I like the idea of bringing it to, what can we do within 6 months? With an eye towards the things that we know are heading in our direction.
The last one, I had talked about, do we want single family design standards? And I think the consensus was we're better off putting our efforts into historical districts. So,
I mean, yes, we want them, but I don't think it.
I think we talked about the idea of doing something, but it's encouraging only. In other words, we provide information that, okay, if you have a home and you're thinking about fixing it up, if you want to take advantage of sort of potentially getting tax credits or whatever, here's how to do it historically.
So could we add, I'm sorry, Dylan, to say this because I know this falls to you. Could we take those ideas of what are the design elements for the various styles? And here is a help sheet for you. Because I would rather pursue, if I have to spend my capital, I would rather spend it on historic districts. That's me personally. I go with whatever the board is interested in. But I think if we can help people, like I think we can change some of the trajectory of people's thoughts just by some of the work we're doing. Like, I was really encouraged by the talks and the meetings that you've had over the last 4 months. It's better than I thought. It was gonna
So,
be.
and in line with that, if that's what people want to do, and they want their neighbors to think that their project that they're gonna do is in line with saving the historic character and the small town feel and all that. If there's information that's available, they're not required to come for review. If there's information they could think about, should think about, can think about, why would you not wanna have it? Why does it cause reaction, do you think, on the part of property owners? I don't know.
See, it could be as simple as for each one of those styles, a handout like that size that has the information on it.
But what is your, that's a good question. What is your experience about why people go, oh, no?
Cause people are scared of things they don't understand.
Yeah.
Cause it's gonna be one Facebook comment that the city's doing this and it's all gonna be.
Yeah, just information, you don't gotta. But
Yeah, it is.
That
funny.
turns into the city said we have to do this.
Listen, the city is
And
the
then
one that's
87
selling Carlson,
people
I'm just
chime
letting you
in.
know, Facebook says so.
Yeah, and there's, it's private parking on Minor Street for the apartments, right? That's what I heard.
I Facebook.
That's one of the basic things, is for much of the public, it's all one government. In other words, the cities and the states and the federal governments were all connected together. That's how much of the public views it, it's all one government.
Well, and people say to me all the time, why did the city sell the school? I was like, we don't own this.
Yeah, people think the city is behind the Argo stuff too. Like you said, they conflate it together.
Okay, does that give you a direction that you're looking for? Okay, well, because like I said, this is not a small thing, this is huge, and like, it's the onion, it's multi-layered.
Right, I do think there's things from that discussion that we could implement in 6 months or less.
Okay.
I think on this next topic about the historic resources elements, obviously, we will implement goals and objectives into the plan in the next 6 months or so, but I don't know that out of this meeting, I was expecting like necessarily clear direction versus like maybe brainstorming, starting to think about what goals and objectives, and then maybe sending them to me the next couple of weeks or something, compiling them for meeting rather than trying to like
Okay.
flesh out
Yeah.
10 goals, because that could take.
It could, and none of us, like, we.
And I'd be angry by then, it would be pretty.
So definitely let's get those to Dylan, but Dylan, can you send out, because the plans that I saw at the block party, those are different than things that I had seen in the last 6 months.
For the
comprehensive downtown plan,
for the send out downtown improvements.
Yeah,
15% plans.
yes.
To HRC, yes. And I'll also, does everyone have a copy of the 2022 resource plan? I'll send a link to it regardless.
Okay, thank you.
Link
Sure.
to 2022 survey plan. Because I think obviously that plan was done while we were did the comprehensive plan in 2017, and then this plan was done, and so.
It started in COVID, but it took like 2 years.
But
get this done.
within that plan, there's quite a good number of already recommended priorities.
Mhm.
Like conduct citywide selective intensive survey of those areas that are kind of were identified as most important. Establish city infrastructure to facilitate designation of historic sites. Promote tax credit opportunities, things like that. There's 8 of them. And so part of me thinks like, well, we already have relatively recently 8 priority areas that can be implemented. So how do we put these into the comprehensive plan as an objective? And then what other objectives do we want on top of that? Because I do think these 8 are already quite good. And
We should move the recommendations from the survey into the comprehensive plan.
like those 8 recommended priorities.
However many she has.
Yeah, she had, but and some of them were like, they were low hanging fruit, and some of them were like very much at the top of the tree.
Mhm.
leave the whole tree.
And I think it sort of, it doesn't need to be a discussion tonight, but having some kind of implementation table at the end of the section that says, here's the activities. Is this short-term, medium-term, long-term? Is this low-cost, medium-cost, high-cost item? And who do we need to work with in doing this if there's one or more parties?
Well, one of the things that I would like to add in there as a defined objective, because it's kind of in here, like identify and promote, but we need to be the city, and this isn't necessarily come from this board, the city has to be better about, oh my gosh, this is why we preserve history. This is what, like, again, another soapbox, we don't do enough to promote what the city is doing, but your 6 months of outreach has made a huge difference in what we're seeing with people's thought process. What would happen if the city did that all the time? And this is the work of one person and like weekly coffee meetings for 2 months.
Right, I'm just sitting outside on Minor Street during events,
Yeah,
and the survey and other stuff, but.
yeah,
Like,
but it hasn't
it's-
been like, you have not had to take over a second job just to do this. This has just been part of your regular job, and look at the difference that it's made. I've never seen that many people, this whole table was surrounded by people who wanted to see historic preservation. I've never seen that. Cool. Yeah,
There were a lot of people at the last block party. I was kind of surprised when I walked down there and I'm like, wow, what's it? Oh, that's Dylan, cool.
that were actually interested in
In the plan.
the plan, That's huge, so I feel like that has to be part of our comprehensive plan, is we have to have a defined campaign of sharing information with our residents.
Yeah, I think coming out of that, my other thought was how to keep people engaged in preservation. And that's through a lot of different things we talked about tonight, and pamphlets.
And in a lot of comprehensive plans, it's actually just called the public engagement plan as part of the overall plan. And there's a thing in planning where they talk about there are 10 levels of engagement in terms of the degree to which the public is involved. And are they just informed? Are they involved? Are they actually making decisions? But that's all part of developing what is the public engagement plan? What is the city going to do in terms of involving the public in planning?
And that's one of our biggest problems is lack of communication because people think you're hiding something. If you don't tell them exactly what you're doing and what it costs and how you're gonna get there, they're like, oh, this is shady. What are they doing? Somebody's lining their pockets. I mean,
Oh my
we've all
God.
seen those conversations on Facebook because nobody bothers to get the facts. So we have to pummel it into their head.
But the thing is, all the facts are there. I mean, I tell people, look, if you wanna see what the city budget is, it is published every 2 weeks when the city council meets.
No, you have to go, look at this, see that?
I know.
No, you give them all the links in the world. You're like, that's not what was approved. Here you go. No, I don't believe it.
That's every email I sent.
Yeah, and remember, although we're getting a lot more young people, we really have an older population in town. And they don't do Facebook and they don't,
Oh, they do
I mean-
Facebook.
well, actually, most of it are the middle to younger ones. It's not the older ones that will object, but they do it to all their friends and all their buddies. And when it comes to voting, because by God, that's their right, they're gonna vote. They're the ones that are gonna make the difference in who they elect and who says what
But
they want.
that's where I think Dylan's idea of outreach is really important. I think that has to be part of our comprehensive plan, is the planning, the 10 degrees of outreach, like the city is gonna have, I would volunteer to do this because I think it's made a huge difference. Like you can actually see the difference that it's made. And I have a lot of those old constituents in my ward. And so I deal with them. I'm always like, just here's my email, here's my phone number, call me. Just leave me a message. And I have done some things with some of my constituents, it's not in the scope of this, but where there's been actual action taken that's made a huge difference. And I think that's how we get historic preservation as something that's not an evil, one more damn regulation versus this keeps the property values up. This keeps,
Keep the town we love.
yeah, keep the town we love.
Yeah.
Stay on Facebook. Oh my God. So,
The timeline for the comprehensive plan redo and the timeliness of getting reworking these, what's the status of that now?
Well, I'm basically done with the first round of engagement this month. And so now that's why I'm starting to kind of rewrite intro sections to each element, put in new demographic information back on it, or whatever. And start looking at, here's our current goals, here's the feedback I got, how do we update the goals? So my goal would be in the next, let's say, 2 months or so, have like a draft of new goals and objectives that I can then present to people and say, what do you think about this? Give me comments and feedback and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't think since I'm basically now doing it myself, because we're not actually rewriting it, we're just updating.
Updating it, right?
So everyone, I can't believe you don't have a $200,000 consultant. Just updating goals.
He's like, yeah, I
We're
wish
not-
we did.
Man, we got a water
Hey.
line, that's what we got.
It's like about use.
But anyway, so it's not gonna be like a fancy update. It's gonna look similar, but it's gonna have, I hope, a lot better goals that are more implementable and specific and things like that, that you can point to and say, we did this and this and this versus these nebulous things. And so I think my hope is to be done in like the first quarter of next year, where it's like it's written and being adopted. So if I can have like a good draft of goals and objectives by like October, let's say, or November, then I can refine it. And so maybe September or October, I could come back with like a refined set of goals and objectives that we can then kind of
Right.
review.
And so you were saying that you were gonna ask us for feedback to you about goals, is that the status
For the
or?
chapter 10, the historic
Yeah,
resources.
I think
element.
I think
what would be great for me is if we're meeting next month and I could have like, here's a list of everything that everyone sent me. And then we could spend 20 minutes saying like, yes or no sort of thing.
Is this one or is it 5?
Yeah, and like prioritize that and also say like, is there a way we can combine them, that sort of thing, because then, so I don't necessarily want to give you homework, but. I
Include
do
that in your
think
email because.
Put it in your
if there's anything, I just think that would be the easier way of doing it than like trying to brainstorm it.
I think you're right.
Here, and obviously if people don't have goals, I will continue to build goals off of what I've heard in surveys and things like that.
So next meeting is September, do we have something that's coming?
I don't have anything on the agenda. There's no like things in the works at the moment within the historic district, so it would tentatively, if there was a normal regular meeting, September 16th.
September 16th. If there's no meeting, can we get those to Dylan? And then that will allow you to continue working, because if we don't, I feel like if we don't need to meet, I don't think there's a need for another work session for this. If we can give Dylan all of the things, and then you can say, okay, make a list of 1 to 7, here are your important things.
Yeah, just if anything comes to mind or what have you. And then also like if anyone has feedback on the kind of initial brainstorming things I had in the packet based on what people told me. Which I don't know if we wanted to talk about any of these now or if folks are ready to.
I don't know, what do you
I
guys think?
was.
He's ready.
No, that,
No, please.
just the one I would put in, that complete that survey and with a view to identifying districts and individual landmarks for designation for long-term preservation and community and engagement or whatever, but something that focuses not on the funding side, but identifying the districts and just putting that out there is something that the city in its planning for its futures, thinking about doing, figuring out how to get done.
And I think there's a big question that's been touched on here several times. And that is what is it the city really wants to be doing as far as historic preservation goes? Central City, for example, most of the town, I think it's in the memo, isn't a historic district. Georgetown, if you look at their zoning code, they put historic preservation at the front of their zoning code, and there's reminders in almost throughout the whole document about design review. And sort of what is it that the town wants to do? Does it want to be, it's a town and it's a valley and it's the whole package? And that's what we're working to, because the comprehensive plan is, if that's the idea, is the place to say that.
Right.
I think definitely adding, I like the idea that 90% of people value to a degree or a high degree historic preservation, but more than 50% don't feel like we're doing enough. You know, which is, to me, would be the impetus for moving this forward. But
It should be a statement in the comprehensive plan.
yes, but also, I don't know that being, let's say, as stringent as Georgetown, I don't know how that's gonna go. If I'm thinking about our current council makeup, and then we have elections this year for 3 council members, so council's about to change potentially.
Which is why we're not gonna designate the entire city, we're gonna create preservation ordinance so people can designate their own.
See, and we talked, were you at the meeting with the, yeah, I was like, you guys, if you have 5 neighbors and you guys wanna designate, come talk to us. I would love for this to come.
Which is
organically.
recommendation number 2 from the 2022 plan to establish the ability for us to designate new districts or.
Well, and you had at the last meeting, you had directed me to that link.
Oh, yeah.
So I have them up and I've not done a lot on that yet, but I do have them kind of on my
To-do list.
to-do list to like kind of start working on that as well, but that's a clear thing to add to at least the comprehensive plan so that when we implement it starting next year, we're
This
fine.
town, this city it's not like Georgetown. It's had an organic development that's been different. It's got a different sense of itself than Georgetown does. And it's obvious just from looking at the buildings and what people have done to them and how they love them in their own way and all that. Part of the, you know, some of that is part of the charm of it, but it's certainly part of the character of Idaho Springs. So it's not the Georgetown approach. It's not.
I don't wanna see that. I feel like that is, like, people see that as just 10 more regulations in there,
Exactly.
awful. And that is, like, that's not the,
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
is not what I would like to see. I wanna see like the people that were in here who are like, how do we do this? How do we make this happen? How do I preserve my house? How do I
Right.
preserve my little piece of neighborhood? You know, I've talked to a bunch of the Sunnyside residents. Sunnyside is like this, I was like, let's talk, come and talk to us. We'll designate you. Sunnyside is ready. Like most, and I would say probably 75% of Sunnyside, because I know most of them.
And here the benefits, I mean, fear is a huge motivator, and if people are really concerned about threats to the character of Idaho Springs, and there are these developments that are happening, outsiders coming with their ideas and doing things, you can do something with that fear. There's a positive action that you can take to manage the change, and this is one of them. So it's the time. I mean, it's
I
just gotta
agree.
be set up right. That's all. And the people have to feel like they're doing it, not that they're being done to.
So maybe also part of this is setting up a very clear list of directions on how do you create your own historic district.
Yes,
Because you know what, you said Minor Street, your piece of Minor Street,
yeah, it's
And then
about 10 houses that.
but
are
your
very
piece and then the
cohesive.
other side.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're like the watermelon house is on the other side.
Well, what is my house? I mean, when it starts as a positive thing, it's why am I not in instead of why are you doing this to me?
I will walk on one side by Safeway, the other side by the park, one side by the highway.
Right.
And,
But it's a really cool little triangular piece of neighborhood. You've got the community
Yeah.
garden, you know, and then this little dead end street, and it's just you and your neighbors.
Are there, is there a good, I like paper maps or mapping resource to help me just visualize where boundaries would be and how we would draw some of these things. Can we get some paper maps of the buildings and,
Just.
you know, was there a survey, was there a map of the survey results that were done,
Oh, Sanborn now?
or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
What
There's
kind of
a-
resource is there?
It's all in GIS, but are you making the switch over to the 3D version or?
not at the moment. I'm the only one who does anything with it and that's kind of been focused on other
Resource
stuff.
hog.
Um, there are some good maps in this survey. I would just need to know what you want to see on the map and I could create a map.
And there is a layer of buildings that can be added. The only problem is that a lot of them don't line up with the, very well with the property
Right,
lines.
yeah,
Oh.
but this 2022 survey plan does have. It's pretty good, it has a map, let me pull it up.
Got a map of the
Weird,
existing
sometimes
district, but
they're-
is there?
Show like,
Shoot. This map in here, I think is quite good, cause it shows ages and structures by parcel data. As well as these two proposed districts that the survey had come up
Or should
with.
these three.
Grass Valley and Colorado Boulevard
No,
area.
it's.
And so, you know, you can see here,
Right.
like, this area is just west of Safeway, pretty much everything is red, meaning 1861 to 1900.
Yeah, that's the map that should be in the back of the comprehensive plan instead of the one that's there now, and then
Really?
go ahead and add the historic district, the buffer,
The other one.
and the individual historic properties.
Where this house is?
True, yeah, like, the ones that are designated individually. Yeah, but this is a good map layer to add those things to, and then it's kind of this comprehensive, cause I have all of, like, I have a map that shows all the currently designated local, state historic sites,
On this side?
national sites. The historic district, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
probably have to-
It's not like a problem.
It's all on page 37.
Page 37, yeah.
So these look.
Is that take page 37?
Well, it's page
Oh,
30.
it's probably, yeah,
There it
you know,
is.
it might be a
Listed as
problem.
30.
No, that's
Really
what
this house and,
And I could get this printed to whatever size you want.
this one.
And
Probably 11 by
Yeah,
17.
and this is Mike and
I
Shelley.
think bigger, you're in plotter territory, I don't know if you guys have a plotter.
No, but I
Because they're
know
all
how
set up
to,
higher.
Tile it.
have access to
Yeah,
one.
so
Well, I could
it's
tile
really-
it, but I can get it. The county has a plotter base, and I was like.
I've been in
Yeah,
there.
it's so
it's been in the
temperamental.
Campaign, it was really good.
This is really what
Yeah,
It's baby
this,
Marcus's son.
I did
Passed
as well.
away, she was like 98 years old.
yeah, that,
Oh, no.
That house
That's-
is beautiful.
that's good
This one,
information. There's not a,
This is Deb's house.
the survey
She owned.
information that's compiled in here in the plan, and it's, I know it's uneven from different sources and different time periods and all that, but it's, it is not mapped out exactly. The age is mapped out on that, but there's not a cross-reference back to the data about the constituent sites, right?
Constituent sites.
So that, well, the things that are in the survey, I mean, you can see it, but you see the age on this, but you can't reference back, oh, this building on this particular corner is such and such a building in the survey. It's here.
Oh, like you couldn't say, oh, this one that's yellow in between the green and red is this,
Yeah, it's this.
like as far as like an address or like.
Yeah, or an address is a good,
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
because this is a pretty static map, but we could. I mean. I've had trouble getting in touch with the person who created this survey, but if I could get this layer, which we might have. I'll have to look. If I have this layer, then it would be easy to just go into the, identify the layer, you know, in their like table. And add all the addresses, so
in.
then at least when you're online, you could
Yeah, you
all
could,
that up.
you could call it up, but yeah, okay.
But of course, in the
Yeah.
back, you know, it has all the addresses with the
Different houses
age
built to
and
the 30s.
integrity and architectural style.
Right, yeah, that's it, those are the kinds of things you'd wanna,
Have directly on that. map.
yeah, look at different layers and then think about the boundary and then grab, you know, check it on the ground.
Mhm,
A lot of work is done,
right,
a lot of work is done, there's a lot of education and small p politics.
Well, it's education, but it's also how do we, like, I think the idea where we put the information and it fits on one sheet. Because most people don't wanna sit through this.
Right.
Like we do, because I love this, but most people do not want to sit through this. And they're like, oh my God, really? They want you to tell you in one sheet, you know, here's your education. You know what's interesting though, I think, I've heard a lot of questions about this, is in the survey where where she shows the list of all of the homes, I think making that public, putting that on the website, and saying, if you wanna see where your house fell in the survey, I've had a lot of people ask me for that.
Isn't it on the website?
I mean, the survey is on the website, so anyone could easily access this link from the survey.
But the table though, that says your house is like, you know, late Victorian or Queen Anne or whatever, and it's medium or high, you know, intent, like
Right,
that particular spreadsheet, I've had a lot of questions about that.
right, well, and I could pull all of those pages out and create its own PDF that says like spreadsheet homes, but I think with our website software. You can have a website expert, I don't know how to embed it, like the table, where you can just like search it through the municipal website. But that's just probably because I'm not a Civic Plus expert.
I was gonna say
Maybe,
Civic Plus probably has a thing for that.
but that would be cool, but I just don't know when, you know.
Just put that in your thought process of, I've had a lot of requests for that one.
Just get excited.
It's, I mean, what a lot of information.
Oh, well, and people are excited to see, oh, is that my house?
So does the library have it?
I don't know, we could put it in the library.
Particularly if people are starting to ask about it.
The library and the historic society.
Yeah, Historic Society got it.
The source said they have it now, I know Jan is really interested in getting a copy.
Yeah, I loaned her my copy, but I told her to get back. Because it's my only one that's like glossy and.
So you know what, you're gonna have to go hunt her down on that one. Exactly. All right, so if we say by mid-September, if we can get comments back to Dylan. You know, on your thoughts on this chapter 10. To include in the historic resources, not only what's there and staff's comments, but also, do you think there are other things that need to be there?
And Clark, I wrote yours down, but if you don't mind,
No,
if
absolutely.
you have it written, so I know the languages.
Yep. Sure.
No. it's
Um,
all- that's on-
Anything else?
So you're saying doing that individually, back to you?
Yeah, if you, I mean, and if you don't have anything, then I think next conversation, we'll just review kind of what everyone's.
I think though that we can do that via email,
That would be fine, yeah, or.
you know, like I don't think we need to have another work session. Unless you all want one, if you want one, I'm there, but
On the list of the properties, it might be worthwhile talking to Clear Creek County IT. And just ask that, I know they will charge for doing special projects. The other one would be if you gave them a layer, would they add it? Because if you created a layer, would they be willing to take it and add it to what they make available on their website, on ClearMap?
Sure.
For example, something historic, but at this point, well, I think the main one would be the properties. That we were just talking about in terms of that table and being able to tie it to properties, but is more or less just how open are they to that? And is this a project they would charge for, or if you give them something
Right.
that they just need to load, would they do that without charging
I
for it?
mean,
Well, and I mean, I can probably would have the budget to put something like that together, since we don't have a forward facing, like GIS that is interactive.
Yeah, and when, for example, they don't have city zoning, they're zoning layers over the house. It would seem like they might be interested
Why
in
do it seem?
having city zoning.
Yeah, you would
It's not
think, I mean,
recognition.
it seems like it would be perfect partnership. Say, hey, I have all the city zoning. However you want to give it to you, that would make sense.
I think that would be good. I think the more we get that out there, because that is that's part of that whole engagement. And also, oh, look, my house, it's got medium or high importance.
Does the city have an ArcGIS online license? To publish like story maps or anything?
Not currently, but we,
If you have the software and you renew it every year, you are allowed to put stuff up on ArcGIS.
yeah, that's true. I mean, I just have like ArcMap desktop. Which is, up to date, but I don't really use the online features much.
Yeah. They just
And-
made it so easy now.
And I don't know if it's gonna change now, but right now, the 3D version you can download for free. That may change next year when they no longer support the 2D version.
So they're gonna let you get spoiled and then charge you for it.
That's reasonable.
As,
But they want the 2D version to go away.
Idaho Springs worked with UCD at all in terms of their historic preservation program, their planning program, or their school of public affairs.
No, not.
Would there be an interest, or is it more trouble and sweet?
The graduate program did the historic survey for Central City about 5 or 10 years ago.
I see you're smiling, breaking out.
I think we're past needing their help. I think we've got,
Yeah.
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 Okay,
Yeah,
All right,
offline
so-
conversation.
I know, like, do we need to,
Good,
okay.
it's okay, good.
All right, so everyone has their marching orders and their homework. Please go through chapter 10 here, look at what was in the comprehensive plan and what we've done, staff's thoughts on it. Get back to dealing with that.
And would it be helpful for me to send a comprehensive plan? As a link also with the other ones?
Yes, please.
One more thing you mentioned is CPI probably fairly soon will start sending out information about the 2026 conference. And they'll be asking if, for people they want to submit session proposals. And usually will come out by around the end of summer.
Is that Denver this year?
I think they'll go to Colorado Springs again. I talked to
I thought
someone
they
on
were going to
staff.
Boulder again,
You think
going
so?
back to Boulder.
I
I
talked-
kind of heard Boulder.
I talked to someone on staff and she was saying Colorado Springs, but you could be right.
I don't know, all I know is
I
it cost
checked
me a
this
lot
year.
of money with the flat tire.
Oh, yeah.
And can you
I'd
make sure
rather
you
be
stay in the
Boulder.
hotel where the conference is?
Yes, we just.
Yes, put that on your calendars because
just
we always
did-
have a nice contingent that goes.
Denver, 2026 is in Denver.
End of
Oh, that's,
January,
I didn't like that.
Yeah, double.
last week of
Oh,
January.
where the
I may
conference is?
stay at home.
So I went into a room.
Save the cities.
You probably was.
Well, if you have something you would like to present, you definitely can get help from the board. I just voluntold all of you that you don't have to step up for that.
What, going to the conference?
No, actually, Dylan had something he wanted to present.
What do you think, has the city or have you gotten a membership in an APC? It's only $35 or $40, it's really worthwhile. I've got 12 hours of webinars Wednesday and Thursday this week that are free with, no, it was $65 for 12 hours.
I remember.
That's a good conference.
Good stuff.
really want to see how good.
There should at least be one membership just to get all the notices.
Right.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
is
like,
the?
National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. It's actually much better, their conference is much better than the National Trust Conference.
I will give them
And it's much more relevant to what we're doing.
Yeah, the city needs them at least. One, it's only, yeah, it says individuals $45,
And they're raising it in 35 for many years.
but we could get the community / municipality one for $75.
I can send you some of the recent notices that they're pretty good about staying in communication about what's coming up, and I'll send them to you, Bill, and you can take a look and see what you can. Whether they want to go out to.
Okay,
Well, one last little thing, kind of along those lines. An adjunct at school mines, since I quit my other work. And I have mines as one course in existing and historic structures. I have that class this fall, we'll start in a week. And on October 11th, I'm bringing them to Idaho Springs. Last year we went to Darwin Mine first, and we went to Historic Society. And I turned them loose downtown. Hey, here's some old historic pictures. Can you duplicate this? What are the architecture? Anyway, we're gonna be here on Saturday, unfortunately. But if anybody's interested in joining us,
I would like
to
to.
walk through town or when we meet at the Historic Society, I'd love for them to hear how this all works, right? They get bits and pieces and stuff. It's a Saturday, October 11th. Love to have you.
He's,
Like I said, they have no, I mean, I'm still learning.
for
It's not
historic
my
preservation.
thing, but I'm still learning. So for them to hear how this process works, the city, the architectural character stuff.
Well, and I'd
That'd
be
be
happy to work on kind of something where it's like, obviously you'll see a lot of these the landmarks, but we could also talk about like the city owned sites and facilities, the work we do with those as well, which.
Yeah, we have like 20 of them. And they're not, we don't, like, we'll see if they come up for COAs, like I expect a couple of them next year.
Like the library probably.
Oh, God. Okay.
And I'm always looking for assignments too, real assignments.
Sites, if you are interested, you can go to,
Yeah.
you can go to sites and facilities, like their meetings are on Mondays, once a month.
They only meet like every other or every 3 months.
Every 3 months, do they? Yeah, because Mike is
We've
on
had a
that.
couple of special.
But they actually are charged with, okay, here's all what the city owns, how do we take care of it?
So one thing you might want to take them to see, and there's not gonna be a lot to see, would take them to the powder house.
Yes.
Because that was something that was used for mining, where they stored the dynamite. And it's a mile south on Soda Creek.
And we're restoring
And
it.
that's one of the towns.
Basically
Looks like
finished.
Oh,
that.
we got a door?
The door, the like great door is on.
What about the big steel door?
That one was on yet. I
Okay.
was there.
Looking for all those types of things. Our team project this semester is gonna be, the Meyer House out near Conifer, it's Jefferson County historic property. And we're gonna go out there, say, to do a condition assessment, what's your recommendation, so those are the kind of things I'd like to get involved with. Not so much technical engineering, which is kind of contrary to what the school of mines wants to do, but they get enough of that.
Is it
I
a
need to
civil
make them
engineer?
aware of what reality is.
Civil engineering students?
Yeah.
Or- Yeah.
Yeah, and most of them are structurally oriented. I'm
Ooh,
trying to
you
break
know.
that mold a little bit as a structural.
We could probably get you into the Underhill too.
Hmm?
The
Yes.
sto-
Yeah, we went up to Underhill.
you're going to the Underhill? It's a really historically interesting building if you look at what was being built. And then you look at how James and Lucy built it, because they didn't have kids, they didn't have a big old family. They were building just for their needs and wants. If you look at the other buildings around town, it's fascinating. This is very much the Dink couple.
Yeah.
Dual income, no kids, because they built it for what they needed and the heck with everything else. It's fabulous.
Yeah, we're gonna do that again.
All right,
Educating them.
I think we are good. We don't have to do an official ending because we did not really do an official meeting. It's just a work session. But thank you guys. I know that these get kind of lengthy, but I think I do think we're kind of on the cusp of like a lot of big stuff, so this is important to hash out.
Thank all of you. Thank you.
So the Powder House,